In the name of the Christ child, born in Bethlehem. Amen. It's hard to believe that Christmas is over for another year. The preparations, the anxieties, the planning for weeks, often for months. We watch the shops all prepare for the Christmas cash-in, for the Christmas energy everywhere. And we pull together our decorations, we write our cards, we join the lines of shoppers, and we come finally on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day for the great moment. It's a whirlwind of activity that leads to Christmas. December is one vast push for us in so many ways. And then this odd thing happens, the day is there, and then it is over. Seemingly, in the space of a few hours, all that intensity yields to an end. For many of us, there's a sweetness, though, that lingers for a day or two or three. After all, we've just been through a beautiful celebration, and for a while at least we have more time at home, maybe, more chances to rest, more possibilities of being with friends and family. But slowly we begin to feel real life pressing in, coming our way, turning back, going to work, going to school. We see the Christmas trees out on the curbs. The poinsettias have vanished. Everyone's bracing to go back to work. Every year in the column after Christmas, I pick up one of my favorite Christmas poems, W.H. Auden's Christmas Oratorio. He called it For the Time Being. And the long poem, many pages long, ends with a meditation on this exact moment, the moment when Christmas ends. And here's how that meditation begins. Well, so that is that. Now we must dismantle the tree, putting the decorations back into cardboard boxes. The holly and the mistletoe must be taken down and burnt, and the children got ready for school. There are enough leftovers to do, warmed up for the rest of the week. Not that we have much appetite, having drunk such a lot. Stayed up so late, attempted quite unsuccessfully to love all of our relatives, and in general, grossly overestimated our powers. Well, the poem goes on to talk about the challenges of going from that mysterious, grace-filled time back into our ordinary days, and it ends this way. To those who have seen the child, however dimly, however incredulously, the time being is, in a sense, the most trying time of all. There's the challenge of this moment after Christmas, facing the long year ahead. The challenge of how do we hold on to something from that precious time? How do we hold on to something that makes any difference with the rest of our year? As Harvard preacher Peter Gomes once wrote, there's a time to lay down one's cares and duties and run to Bethlehem in the manger. And then there's also a time to return, to begin where we left off. For we have come from an encounter with the world of the possible, he writes, in the midst of so much that seems impossible. Today we're celebrating this feast of the Epiphany, and there are these questions in the air. Are we any different because of Christmas this year? Did anything happen? Did anything speak? Did we learn anything, hear anything that can make any difference at all in the shape of our days? Did we see God in that manger and begin to imagine a world ruled by love? Did we catch some glimpse of how our lives could be? This Feast of the Epiphany, beginning on the 12th day of Christmas, marks the arrival of the wise men who traveled from the east, following a star to find the child king in Bethlehem. Epiphany means literally the shining out. And this season, following precisely on the heels of Christmas itself, is about the ways that the light we saw in the manger can shine into the rest of our lives. And it starts this season with the Magi, who may be our window in whether it might be possible to live the Christmas mystery all year long. It was a long journey the wise men made to seek out this new king. They were probably priestly astrologers, and when they saw the brilliant light of a new star in the heavens, they decided simply to follow, to see where that would lead them, to see what they might find out along the way. And so they headed out westward across the long desert. As they drew close to Bethlehem, they went by the palace of the puppet king Herod to tell him that there was a king being born in their midst and asking if they knew how they might find their way there. And there we learn of Herod's growing anxiety to hear a competitor king maybe is rising up. So he says as he sends them on their way, "Please tell me if you find that king, that I might come and worship." And so the Magi arrive, and they find the child and Mary and Joseph, and they kneel and worship, bringing their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then they chose not to return to Herod because of a dream they had that warned them that there was danger there, and instead they find their way back by another way. And we know that Herod, in his paranoia about this child being born, sent out orders to kill all the children under 2 in Bethlehem. It's a moving story, even with this dark shadow of Herod's cruelty hanging over it. Christ was born in the Middle East. Christ was born in a time and a place every bit as dangerous and violent as ours. Our world and theirs are not so different. And so I hope by looking for the next few moments at the story of the wise men, what they did, what they experienced, that we might find some windows, some clues into how to live this Christmas mystery now that our days are moving on and real life is coming our way. My first clue comes from the whole shape of the story of the Magi. If you want to live the meaning of Christmas here and now, you will need, first of all, to open your hearts and lives to a strangely welcoming God. Matthew's account is the most Jewish of the Gospels, with its references to the law and the prophets and the temple. But here at the very beginning of the story of the coming of the Messiah, we do not have Jews in the picture at all. Instead, Gentiles, foreigners, Arabs, Persians, people from far away in other cultures being the ones to come and kneel in the presence of Jesus. No shepherds in Matthew's story. The ones who come are the outsiders, the non-Jews, the ones who have no business being there, we would think. Matthew begins the story of Jesus by declaring that from the start he has come not for one small group, but for everyone. And Matthew gives us a Jesus who shatters boundaries, not honoring them, taking apart boundaries of religion, of ethnic background, of wealth and poverty, breaking all the barriers to say this child is for the world. His life will, in the years to come, bring together the sinners, the unclean, the lepers, the mentally ill, the poor, women, children, Roman soldiers, everyone who could so easily be left out. And this man comes to bring everyone in, and all of them will eventually sit at his table. Many of the ongoing struggles of Christian churches have had to do with deciding who's in and who's out, who can be saved and who can't, who can come to communion and who shouldn't, who should be serving and who should we be serving and giving our best attention to. Jesus will make clear that the church is meant to be a home big enough for the world, for everyone, with a heart big enough to focus on the poor and the struggling in their midst. Who do we at Trinity need to reach out and welcome in the Christ child's name? Whose plight and struggle are calling to us? How can we welcome into our life, for example, a generation of young people searching for life's meaning but are not currently finding it in church? How can we be welcoming and embracing to them? How can we honor other faiths while being faithful to our own? How can we align ourselves together with each other to be people of God, engaged in healing this world around us? Open your minds and hearts. That's the first clue to living the mystery of Christmas. The second is find your stillness. The culmination of the Magi's journey was when they knelt and worshiped before the Christ child. There they were, at what poet T.S. Eliot called the still point in the turning world, where the infinite became finite, eternity came into time. And on Christmas Eve, those of us who were here to kneel and sing Silent Night were singing and adoring and praying in the presence of that moment in that child when the creator of everything that is became flesh, one still point in the turning world. But here's the question. How can we find the still point in our world right now, especially as we move far away from Bethlehem and the whole Christmas celebration? How can we know the security, the joy, the creativity, the generosity, the confidence of being rooted and grounded in God when it isn't Christmas Eve anymore? Our lives are pulled in so many directions with pressures outside and turmoil and fears and worries and a traffic jam of ideas and thoughts and worries inside us. The monk Thomas Keating describes our minds and souls as basins of salty water. When they're stirred, the water is cloudy and our vision is obscured. We can't see anything, but when the water is allowed to be still and at rest, the silt filters to the bottom, leaving the water clear. And it's then that we can see clearly our relationships, our motivations, our fears, our angers, our worries, and see them as not us, but pieces of us that we can look at and decide what to do with. We need to find a still point to sustain anything of the gift of this Christmas story, this sense of being rooted and grounded in a holiness that wants us and loves us. We need regularly to go to a still point where we can know ourselves as centered, rooted, connected to God. And there in that place, simply to notice the worries and fears and know that they are not us, but some part of us that we will not let own us, and we'll choose how to live with them. It takes being aware of our deepest self, grounded in God. Our deepest self beyond all of our presenting ourselves and all of our desires and all of our ways of trying to impress. Our true self where we are known and loved and held. And the way to keep Christmas going all year long is to keep going back to a still point. Take 10 minutes or 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes of being still and relaxing and letting the stress go away and simply be aware of being held and still. And while all the traffic is going on, just let it go. There is enormous energy and joy and clarity and hope available to us. We could call it Christmas energy if we will regularly go to our stillness, to our still point, and there take a look at who we are, God's child, God's beloved in the moment. The mystery of Christmas is that the Christ born in Bethlehem is alive in us. My deepest self, my true self, is rooted in God's life in me. The same for you. For many, the natural path is this journey of quiet. But of course, many of us aren't introverts, we're extroverts. And extroverts too need to find their way. Deep conversations with people they can trust. Close friendships with people, small groups where people will challenge us and be honest with us and help us to see through all the silt in the water for who we are and where we are. Opening our hearts, finding our stillness. The Magi have one more clue for living the Christmas mystery this year. It was the key to their whole journey. They were willing to follow a star, to be led by a hope, a vision of where God wanted them to go. Star followers, we could call them, are people who refuse to resign themselves to the way things have to be, the way things are set up, the way things are going to be. They're determined to explore, to learn, to build, to change. They refuse to give in to hopelessness. They come away from the manger convinced that God intends to build a world of hope and justice for everyone, and they're ready to follow God's leading. A year ago, the tragic killings in Newtown launched a star that Trinity parishioners have been following ever since to end the plague of gun violence in our country. We are just now beginning to follow a star that will lead Trinity into full and deep engagement with the troubled, challenged young people in the Dever McCormick School. We're watching that star and learning how to follow. And let me tell you about one Trinity parishioner, Nancy Scull, who, while on a vacation in 2007 in Tanzania, caught a glimpse of a star that's changed her life and the lives of many others. A tour guide took Nancy and her friends to see a poor school in the middle of a huge coffee plantation, where she saw dozens of bright-faced children in a school that had no books, almost no desks, no clean water or sanitation facilities. She fell in love with the students. And immediately when she returned, she began raising funds so that they could have the basics to get an education. She forged close relationships in Miale, the town that was there, and beyond, and began to expand the number of schools that could be served by simply having the basic resources to learn. Her nonprofit organization, Friends of Miale, is growing and expanding. Everything I've done in my life, she says, has contributed to this project. There is a lot of God in this work. She's following her star. She was called, she spotted a star, and she allowed that to begin to lead her in a direction that has changed, she will say, her life completely. A church is meant to be a community of star followers. For some of us, it will be a drastic, brave, bold move, just like that one, to change your life, to make something happen. For us, it will be smaller and simpler, maybe completely unnoticed by so many, but deciding that we will follow a star and change something about our world that desperately needs to be changed. Opening our hearts, finding our stillness, following our star. There's a deep rhythm to this Christmas and Epiphany season. We travel to Bethlehem to see the Christ child, and we linger there for a few moments, maybe a few days, but now it's time to be on our way. The decorations are put up, the last carol has been sung, but the mystery of Christmas still is ahead of us. Matthew tells us that when the Magi departed to return home, they traveled by another way, which is exactly the point. We who worshiped at the feet of the Christ child were meant to travel once we left in a new way, opening our hearts, finding our stillness, following our star. You see, the mystery of Christmas is meant to last all year long.